please stop launching new campaigns. People mistake activity with results. If I'm doing more, then of course I'm going to yield more results. It's actually even worse because you're doing more, you're exerting more energy. And because you're exerting more energy and there's more things in work, that means there's more planning, there's more workflows, there's more resource allocation. It's like a lot. And the reality is like you can never escape the 80-20 rule. 20% of your actions will yield 80% of your results. Hey everybody, welcome to episode 3 of Performance Therapy. Today we're talking about scaling blind, how the myth of just spend more and everything will work out. And we really want to talk today about like how to know when you're ready for scale and how to avoid lighting your budget on fire. So Gonzalo, this is another spicy one for our therapy session today on scaling and how people just, it's criminal, honestly. Like the amount of wasteful spend that these companies do in terms of like how they're investing and just like basic fundamentals are just not in place. So I want you to kick us off with your thoughts. Like what comes to mind when it comes to just like the myth of just spend more and scaling?
It's keeping yourself busy essentially. And you're seeing scaling in terms of scaling results. But when I see companies scaling, they're scaling the number of channels they're running on, they're scaling the number of campaigns. So the scaling you're talking about, and that directly translates to pipeline and revenue and scaling your paid media performance. It's not necessarily the scaling definition that brands follow. They see people talking about, and I'm getting ahead of one of the topics we had, but you usually see people talking about, or for example, in our case, we launched the Reddit ads course. Our team member Chris is putting a lot of Reddit content out there. Like someone might be seeing that content and they'll ping the agency, guys, let's run ads on Reddit. Let's scale that channel.
Sorry for everybody that's getting those things.
Yeah, oh, I see Reddit. This guy's talking about Reddit. Do the course. Let's launch a campaign on Reddit. Let's start scaling your paid media program when maybe you have $10,000 to spend. So that's scaling activities, but not scaling your effectiveness. So to me, when I hear scaling, it might still be like keeping yourself running on one channel, maybe 2 channels. You're still scaling and unlocking all the possibilities you have there before you actually unlock another channel. So that's the difference for me when I hear scaling, that it might not be the same definition.
You maximized all the possible value that this channel can provide to you, and now you're ready for the next one.
Yeah. And when you're saying, let's scale your paid media program, maybe scaling your paid media program might not necessarily mean you need to unlock another channel. Might be, okay, let's just do more on LinkedIn. Maybe we're not doing enough because maybe we didn't have the budget or for whatever reason, the strategy, whatever. So let's scale the paid media program, yes, but that might mean let's just do more of what we're doing already. Not necessarily let's keep ourselves busy, create a huge bottleneck with our creative team because now you're running ads on Reddit. Now you're running ads, I don't know, maybe you're trying TikTok, whatever.
Yeah.
And now the team is busy doing a lot of stuff that doesn't necessarily impact your results, which was the ideal outcome. Because I don't think brands ask this just because they really think that's how they will reach their goals. But yeah, more often than not, that's just not the case.
There's like a couple of things that are like speaking in my brain right now. It's like shiny object syndrome.
Yeah.
Because I think what you're touching on, right? You're running ads on Google and then, you see a post on LinkedIn and you're like, oh, Microsoft is crushing it. We need to go on Microsoft now, right? And then you jump to Microsoft and then you're jumping to Reddit or whatever the case might be. But it's like that FOMO of missing out where, hey, if we're not spending money on these other platforms, we're not reaching people that we should be. And ultimately, we're not going to be successful for it. Which is, it's a good intention, but it can result in absolute disaster. Because at the end of the day, with paid ads, you only have a finite amount of budget. So you have to be much more careful with the decisions you make and how you spend that budget. And when you start to invest in all these different channels and the amount of channels grows, but your budget stays the same, then you start to run into some problems where now the things that were performing well for you stop performing as well as they could be because you're taking money from the things that were actually producing real returns for you, right? And I think one other thing, just to kind of dive into this, is the difficulty of going from 0 to 1 and how that compares going from 1 to 10. 0 to 1 is the hardest place to be, in my experience. So for context, I've never ran ads on LinkedIn before. I've never done ABM. I need to go from 0 to 1. That's hard because basically the level of certainty is low and the perceived risk is extremely high, right? You have no benchmarks, nothing to fall back on. Like it is truly innovation in its finest, right? You're starting from blank canvas. So for a lot of folks, they go 0 to 1. They're not really happy with what 1 looks like. And then instead of saying like, okay, let's make it better, if there's like some good things here, which this, by the way, is called the process of optimization, right? They're like, no, let's go and do 0 to 1 in a completely different context, right? Somewhere else because of FOMO, shiny object syndrome, and, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So if you are in this trap of FOMO and shiny object syndrome, what I recommend is that you just set up a few rules. Rules are helpful because they give us a context of how we should behave in certain situations. So one rule that I invite everyone to adopt is around your budget allocation. And what we usually advise clients is just allocate at minimum 10% of your budget for this 0 to 1 experimentation. So for like these crazy ideas, all the FOMO your brain can allow, right? Like 10% of your monthly budget can go to this. 90% of your budget goes to the things that are boring. They're no longer sexy because you already figured it out. And now it's just like the grind of optimizing and like iterations and you know what I mean? And all this, it's lost its, you know, appeal, but it's paying the bills. So 90% of your budget goes towards that. And to your point, like doing more, right? But also better in that contrast. And then that 10%, okay, let's go wild, right? And do everything we got to do.
Yeah, that's why I think scaling and having that FOMO are related because that's how brands think about it. When they think about scaling, it's never about, okay, what can we do more here? Like, how can we do more of what we're already doing? It's more so, okay, what other channels can we run, you know? I know our audience spends time on Meta. Why don't we try Meta? And then they don't have the budget because, to your point, they don't have that alignment to, okay, let's just put 10% of the budget, 5% of the budget aside for that. It's like, okay, let's take budget of what's already working towards that new initiative. Then they let it run for a few weeks, few months. It doesn't work, maybe because it was a losing fight from the beginning, and now Meta doesn't work. Yeah. That's what happens, you know. Yeah. And it was you never gave it a chance. Yeah. So, and I see a lot of brands making that mistake. Like, again, the intention is great, but they're just keeping themselves busy launching that success because maybe that's how their bosses are also measuring their own success. Like, if you have a person that's dedicated to run the relationship with the agency, you need to keep these guys busy, you know?
Yeah.
But busy work doesn't equal results. So that's why if the client wants us to scale or wants whatever agency, in-house team, whatever, to scale, it's one thing. But if you want us to do work, that might be another. And sometimes they're not related. Sometimes they might be. You might find specific use cases, of course. Few exceptions. But yeah, that's why I think those two are related because especially if you're a marketer, you spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. You have peers, you're in Slack groups, right? You're in communities. And it's easy to feel like whatever. It's like social media, right? At the end of the day, it is. You're seeing, like the example you gave in the other episode about the gym. Like you're seeing this guy lifting more than you, but you don't know their goals. You don't know what they're doing, what they're eating, you know? And maybe you're just showing up to the gym. It's your first time and
you're comparing yourself.
Yeah, you're comparing yourself with others and maybe, and I'm not even taking this into account, but maybe the experience that others are sharing, sometimes it's not true as well.
Yeah.
And now you're comparing yourself with like
a false reality.
Like social media, it's like that. Like you only post your highlights. You don't post, okay, we unlocked Reddit, but how many tries did you give Reddit? It wasn't at the first time.
Yeah.
And yeah, like when it comes to scaling, that's why too the first thing that I try to advise the clients on, and even the team, it's like, okay, what are we doing already? Can we do more of that? Like, for example, Google search and getting specific here. This campaign is working. Can we put more budget there? Okay, we can't. Okay, let's go to the next one. have we maximized all the options in terms of what we think can drive the impact? Yes. Okay, so now let's try to try something new. For example, when it comes to Google, another launching campaigns with another match types. You're running exact match. Let's try phrase match. Okay, now you're testing. Let's try broad match, if anything. Okay, you're testing. But even if that doesn't work, you already have a good foundation. So you don't have all the eggs in one basket, which is awesome. But at the same time, you're still in Google search. You're not launching YouTube videos, you know?
Yeah.
So, and if you don't have that mindset and you don't have those priorities figured out in your head, you can also cause your team to feel overwhelmed because now these guys need to produce videos.
Yeah.
And the work it takes to build like those types of assets, sometimes it's the impact that will have in the overall strategy is super reduced. So when you're talking about scaling, you first need to maximize all the options you have available based on what's already working, and don't get distracted because what's working for you might not work for others, and what's working for others might not work for you. So
Yeah,
that's what I see most of the time. So scaling, yes, but
responsibly.
yeah, responsibly, and be smart about it. Because if you're already seeing some level of success, at least from my experience, it's much easier to show and make the case internally. Like, guys, we spent 10K in this campaign, this channel, whatever. We got 10 MQLs. Based on our baselines right now in the past 30, 60 days, if we spend 15K, we can get this. Versus, okay, give me 5K for a new channel and let's figure out what I can give you, you know?
Yeah, there's something that I want to emphasize here, which is please stop launching new campaigns. This is like a public service announcement. Oftentimes, at least in our experience, and you touched on this, is people mistake activity with results. If I'm doing more, then of course I'm going to yield more results. And the reality, and this is something that I'm so guilty of, especially like, you know, running ad conversion, is I will overload the team and I'll overwork them with so many different projects and initiatives. Hey, sorry. Or I'm like, oh, I've got this idea, right? And I'm like throwing all this stuff. And the reality is like you can never escape the 80-20 rule. 20% of your actions will yield 80% of your results. And no matter how many times I try to like ignore this fundamental rule, it always comes back around. And what happens is like it's actually even worse because you're doing more, you're exerting more energy. And because you're exerting more energy and there's more things in work, that means there's more planning, there's more workflows, there's more resource allocation. It's like a lot, you know?
More bottlenecks.
More bottlenecks, more problems, exactly.
Yeah.
And one of the fundamental differences between paid media and organic or email and all these other channels is with paid media, we are trying to create some level of predictability. We want to build a system to the best of our ability that is founded on a strategy that makes sense for our business and it's aligned with our stakeholders, where we can put somebody into our system and drive a meaningful business impact on the other side. That's what we're trying to do fundamentally. So when people are launching all these new campaigns and they don't have a strategy in place and it doesn't connect, they're basically going 0 to 1, 0 to 1, 0 to 1 again, like across all these channels. They never really find success and then they're back where they started, right? And really what you want to do and what this looks like in practice is like if we're running webinars and we get webinars to work really well on LinkedIn, for example, and it's crushing it, and we've really like mapped out that system. Now, when we go to Meta, we're not saying, oh, we're here in Meta land, you know, like, what are we going to do? And then we just start from absolute scratch.
Yeah.
We go, oh, webinars worked for us on LinkedIn. Let's use webinars on Meta, right? Because fundamentally, you're still going after the same person. You're just meeting them in a different platform, right? So now what you're doing is you're tailoring the creative and the targeting, et cetera, based on the nuances of that platform, but you're driving them to the same destination, which is that offer, that system that you created that is working for you. Like an analogy here to kind of explain is like, imagine you were a travel agent and you had a quota to get more people to book a trip to the Bahamas. Like the Bahamas is your offer, right? It's the experience, it's the system, right? That you're like, if you go here, you're going to be happy, you're going to have a great time, right? And now what you're doing is you're going to all these different channels, aka destinations, right? Maybe you fly to Canada and like you're trying to get Canadians and sell them to go to the Bahamas, right? That could be your LinkedIn, right? And then you're going to Meta, right? And now you're going to another place in the world and you're trying to get them, etc. But you're driving them into the same system, and that always gets missed. And the cool thing about like scaling paid media is it takes less effort than scaling organic content. And content, well, one of the biggest lies is that content doesn't require money or time. It requires a ton of both, especially if you want to do content well at scale. It requires money in the sense of like, production costs, your personal hours invested in it, resources, headcount, etc. There's a lot of moving parts. And with paid media, you have much more simplicity in terms of the system you create, right? I need a really good target audience, I need a really good ad, and I need a really good offer. If I nail those three things, I can create something meaningful here, right? Where I drive some sort of response that I want. And just to segue here, when you fall into the trap of like this shiny object syndrome, and we're beating this with a dead horse because this is like the number one thing, that if you take anything from this show, it's this, is budget dilution. Can you talk quickly about budget dilution and like what launching more campaigns happens on the budget side?
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. So if you have like $100 a day to spend on LinkedIn, you have one campaign, you have 3 ads under that campaign. So your $100 are spent. I mean, you can arrange the settings how you want, but in theory, you can have those $100 split equally across those 3 ads. Now you launch a new campaign, but you still have those $100. So now each campaign dividing equally gets 50, but now each ad gets less. So if that first campaign was already working and now you launch the second, that means, and it's math, the campaign that was working gets less budget on a daily basis for that new campaign that sometimes it's a brand new thing. But now the problem is that some brands don't stop there. Now they might launch 6 ads under one campaign. So until you actually get the learnings, you start diluting the budget even more. So so one campaign, one ad, that's like different layers. You're adding different complexity layers. And yeah, at the end of the day, it's math. The more campaigns you add, if your budget stays the same, you're eventually going to take budget out of top performing campaigns to the detriment of others. And the problem when it comes to B2B SaaS is that if you're running, if your offer is trying to get demos, getting meetings with your sales team, right? And your cost is $1,000 per demo, and you spend $100 a day on LinkedIn, you can see how long on average it's going to take you to get one demo, like 10 days. But if you're spending 50 now, it takes 20. Yeah. So it's not even a matter of if it's working or not. Maybe the sample size will be low. And if the goal is driving demos, the problem that I see sometimes is you might be launching one campaign. Oh, here's a piece of content. Like, here's this white paper that our team has been working on for the past 3 months. We need to promote it. But it doesn't fit your goals. Yeah, but we need to, the team put a lot of effort into it. Now my boss is breathing down my neck. They really need this live. So, okay, let's do it. It's your money. But you see the problem because now you're taking budget of something that's working. It's not just that it's working. It's something that fits within your goals just to accommodate a push from someone internally that sometimes, first of all, doesn't really understand how paid media works, because when they're pushing that, they don't even think, oh, these guys are going to be taking budget out of the top performing campaigns. They don't think about that. Neither they have to, but that's what happens. And yeah, that's the complexity. Like, the more campaigns you launch, the more the larger your budget needs to be. The problem is that if you're running 10 campaigns on LinkedIn with 100K budget a month, and next month you have 20 campaigns, your budget won't increase proportionally, right? Yeah. It will most likely stay the same.
Do more with less.
Yeah, and those new campaigns will distract you from your goal. That's first. And then it will be a lot of activity. And then one thing that we're not even taking into account here is what it takes to actually keep those campaigns running, because now you have other ads you need to refresh more often. So the team needs to be worrying about that stuff as well. So you're doing more. You're taking budget out of what's already working at what cost, right? And that's what I see often. And again, the people that push this internally don't don't really take that into account, and that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
But that's where we need to step in, or the performance teams in-house to put a pause on that. I know you said it first, like stop launching new campaigns. That's a good that's a good clip right there. But that's often the case, because if you're spending $100 a day, more often than not, that campaign can get 200, can get 300.
Yeah.
But that sometimes that doesn't happen, because what you're doing is, oh, this is working, let's launch this new campaign, let's launch this new asset, and you're just diluting your
Yeah.
budget and spreading yourself too thin.
It's
And
a-
that's
it's a
the
vicious
issue I
cycle.
see often. It might sound like basic, but sometimes that's what stops you from getting to the next level, because you keep doing what you were doing before, launching a lot of stuff, keeping yourself busy, which also gives the internal teams the wrong signals, like, oh, whatever these guys are doing isn't working, let's give them new ads.
Yes.
And now you get into this vicious cycle
You
where
attack the problem with activity versus
Yeah.
attacking the problem with just like fundamental strategy and like math, right? Of does our budget make sense in relation to the amount of campaigns we have?
yeah.
Yeah.
And now it's a vicious cycle, because now your internal team was educated to operate from that assumption. So, oh, whatever Silvio is running isn't working, let me build Silvio new ads. And maybe Silvio doesn't need new ads, you know,
Yeah.
Silvio needs less ads.
Right.
But
No one talks about that. Everyone's always like, you need more ads, you need to launch more things, etc. And there's like, yeah, this is definitely a big misnomer. One tip for everyone, if you're falling into that trap and you've been nodding your head the whole way through, is when you start any paid media program, the first thing you want to do is you actually want to set up a strategy. And if you guys want to go deeper on this, check out our Building a Paid Media Program course. We talk about this at length. But essentially, the first step is you want to establish a strategy. A strategy is just a plan. And on that plan, you want to show, based on your segmentation, how much budget is going to go for each thing. So for context, like if you're in the situation where you have multiple stakeholders and, you know, Sally has her needs, Suzanne has hers, John has his, etc., you can basically allocate a specific amount of budget just for those different stakeholders and their initiatives. And then you can communicate to the stakeholders and say, hey, you only get X amount of dollars. That's your limit. And based on that, a simple way to calculate how many campaigns can I actually support without diluting my budget is just take your monthly budget, divide it by 30.4, and then take the difference and then divide that by $100. So assuming you have $100 per campaign, that whatever that number is, that is the amount of campaigns that you can successfully support. And then assuming each campaign gets at least 3 ads, now you know how many ads you need as well. And basically what you can do with that is now you can go to that stakeholder and you can say, you only get 5 campaigns, you know, because if I give you a 6 campaign, right? And remember, this is assuming $100 a day. It gets even lower when the campaign starts to perform well, because now that 100, you see positive signals and you're like, oh, I need to take it from 100 to 150 to 200, right? So that means now you've got to take money from the other 4, right? To support the one that's doing very well. So at the end of the day, like the budget is the thing that is really going to limit your options available, right? And how much you can or can't do. And the main thing that I think we're trying to say here is like, just don't fall into the trap of doing so much to the detriment of like your fundamental financial means, where you're never going to have a chance to actually be successful, right? And drive some meaningful stuff. So I think,
And just to add real fast, sorry to cut you off, but you had an important point there. It's not just because, oh, I can afford to run 5 campaigns, that it means you must run 5 campaigns. Because to your point, if you're running 5 campaigns and that's what you can afford, assuming $100 a day per campaign or 50, whatever it is, when it's time to scale, which is the end topic, right? If you already have 5 campaigns, there's only so much you can do with your existing budget. And now it's harder to show internally like, oh, let's pause these 3 campaigns to scale these 2. Okay, why? Can you show me why how those campaigns are performing, what's happening? Because maybe, and they might have different KPIs, but they might be performing to a degree, but the way they are performing might not be, or the metrics those are driving might not be the metrics you care about. But just because now you're analyzing those, you can't really make the case. Like, let's look at a really silly metric for this example, like engagement rate. You're wanting to drive leads, pipeline, and those campaigns are optimizing for engagement because it's top of the funnel, whatever it is. And now, in terms of engagement rate, those are performing above average. But what you care about at the end of the day is leads, MQLs, pipeline. But now you're making it hard on yourself to pause those campaigns because based on their metrics, they're doing well, right? It's just different KPIs. And the assumption that I see sometimes is like, okay, we can afford 5 campaigns. Let me think about 5 different offers, you know?
Yes.
When in reality, okay, we can afford 5. Let's aim for 3. Instead of 100, let's do 150, because depending on your audience size, and for the folks running ads on LinkedIn, you see that $100 a day is not that much.
Yeah, exactly.
And you might exhaust that like
3
by the
clicks,
time you wake up.
you're done.
Yeah, by the time you wake up, it's done.
Right.
And take it as a rule of thumb. And I know it might sound like a lot of math, like divided by 30.4, but it's pretty straightforward. But more importantly than that, it's like a rule of thumb. It's not a rule. It doesn't mean like, okay, I can afford 5, I'll do 5, or I can afford 10, I'll do 10. No, this is your ideal max, but aim for less so you have the room to eventually scale what's working well. Otherwise, it's each campaign gets $100. Let's keep it going until we pause them, right? There's not really much you're doing on a daily basis if your hands are tied.
Yeah. So now that we talked about, more so around the systemic piece of it, which I think fundamentally this is what we see most B2B SaaS companies like just get wrong around effort versus, really what we're talking about here is not just ROI, but ROE, like your return on effort, right? For every hour I put into this thing, am I maximizing the utility of it, right? Let's segue now into some other things around like traps to avoid to not burn your budget in the process of scaling. What comes to mind?
Launching too many campaigns.
I mean, other than that, of
That's
course.
the biggest trap,
Yeah.
What else? Like that, I think we covered a few of them. Like that shiny object, that's a trap because, I mean, we've already went through it. Those are the big ones that come to mind, to be honest.
Yeah, I would just say one other one just to like iterate it because you touched on it like briefly, but I really want to make sure that this is very clear. Is you said, oh, if I know it works, then I'm going to do this. Know it works is very important, right? To know if you're ready to scale, right? To not burn budget in the process. So to know it works, it sounds simple, but there's a lot of things that are, kind of depending on that. Number one, that you have actual conversion tracking in place. That I can understand, hey, this thing is actually performing and it's causing the events that I care about, right? People are responding the way that I want. That's one thing. The second thing is that you have that dashboard, right? Where you can connect your ad activities to revenue. So you understand, hey, yes, this is a good return on my effort and on my investment, And then finally is that your team is ready for it, which you also touched on, like, do you have the resources to substantiate that next level of scale? Because budget ultimately is it comes down to the amount of options you have available and how fast you can go through the options, right? It's speed. So if I'm spending $100 a day and I need to get to $300 max before pausing an ad, it's going to take me 3 days, right? And that's assuming there's one ad variable, right? You split it by 3 now, it takes even three times as long and so on and so forth. So now if you go from spending $100 a day to $1,000 a day, you might need new ads by like day 3. Now it's just like implementing that means like now you might need 2 creative refreshes per week, so now the resources involved just like scales dramatically, and most SaaS companies are not even close to that, but just to show you guys like what is the maximum of this, right? Like what is the, the ultimate version of this look like, so you can kind of back factor.
And there's one thing that we're not even taking into account, which is having the tough conversations to put a hold on those conversations. Because no one wants to be on the other side when the client or your boss comes in and says, oh, Silvio, launch this. Oh, actually, I don't think we should because it might perceive you as lazy. Oh, this guy doesn't want to do it. When in reality, you don't think it's best, right? So even though it's not really like having those tough conversations, even if it's 20 minutes, 30 minutes, it also gets you a high return on effort.
Yeah.
Because if you don't say anything, or if you just nod, you don't say yes, or you don't say no, but you just take it, they assume it's going to get done. And now the mental space it takes after the call, like, oh, I should have said that. Now I have to launch all these 3 campaigns. It doesn't make sense. It will disrupt the performance. And also too, because now if you didn't say anything, even something as simple as like, oh, let me check if it aligns and I'll follow up with you. Just don't take it. If you don't say anything and you follow up after or a couple of days after and saying, oh guys, actually I thought about it a little bit more, I don't think we should, by that time it might already be too late because the team already started working on it. So the power of, and that's ongoing, right? But the power of keeping the client honest and keeping them grounded, the client, your boss, again, I'm speaking to my reality in this case, but there's a lot of it that's out of sight of clicking on ads, launching campaigns. It's more like communication with the client that can get you a long way, and put a pause on all those initiatives, because sometimes, and people don't even want order takers. They are bringing it up because, again, the intention is great. In their head, it makes sense, but you're the person on the other side doing the media arbitrage, launching, looking at the strategy, looking at the dashboard, like you're saying. You're the one looking at the data on a daily basis. They're not. So if you don't think it fits, you should say it. And again, if I don't mean this to say there should be a lot of back and forth or like a discussion, but if at the end of the day they still want to go forward, fine, it's their budget, but you advise them not to, right?
Yeah.
And because I've been on the other side where, oh, I should have said that stuff, and now I'm launching the campaigns.
And you're just like, you're
almost
like
crying.
reluctant to do it, and you're just doing
because you're launching stuff that you already think it won't work. That's the worst, one of the worst feelings that you can have as a performance marketer, right? Oh,
Right.
I'm spending this next hour launching this stuff that will
useless.
suck.
Yeah.
But I didn't say it. Now I need to launch it. Now I'll need to analyze it to say it's useless when I maybe should have put a hold on it right from the beginning.
Right.
And that comes with time, of course, but
I think that's one of the biggest differences between like a new performance marketer and a seasoned one, or really just like a junior versus an expert, is the junior will just take things at face value. The senior will dig deeper and ask fundamentally why, and like, does it make sense? And then stand their ground to defend their position. Where, yeah, I mean, eventually, like, you're here to serve your employer or your client.
yeah.
And you have to be flexible. But if you do move forward under those circumstances where you're like, hey, launching these campaigns makes absolutely no sense. Like, I can show you the math. But they're like, hey, I know it doesn't make sense, but hey, politics. You know what I mean? We just got to get it live or whatever.
And they respect you even more.
They respect you more. And then not only that, when it eventually fails, you're not blamed. I told you, I'm good. Hey, so it's like your insurance policy, which on that note, like, one insurance policy that every B2B marketer needs is an aligned strategy plan, where you map out, and we've kind of talked about this in some earlier episodes, where you map out exactly, okay, for every initiative, here's the budget and the corresponding campaigns, etc. You map it all out, and then you get it in front of the people that matter, the stakeholders, so you get buy-in early. This is something that I recommend everyone does before the new quarter starts. So when you do the next quarter planning, you put together this plan, you do the forecast, and you get buy-in from all these individuals. So now moving into the quarter that you've got this stamp of approval, you go back to it. This is your shield, right? So like, because people will forget.
Yeah.
They're gonna forget. They're not gonna remember how much budget they have. They're gonna get lost in the day-to-day of startup
we
life.
look at it every day. They don't.
Right,
That's the
exactly.
truth.
So
it's
you
easy
need
for
to-
us, but not for them.
You need to constantly bring them back to like grounding of them, like, hey, wait a second. You remember when we aligned on this thing, and bring them back, et cetera. And the other thing too on that, in terms of being able to scaling more implies that you're going to be doing more of what works. And that also implies a budget increase. And one of the easiest ways to secure more budget from stakeholders is to create this plan, get buy-in, and then show them the results afterwards, right? Like, hey, here's what worked, here's what didn't. And if you can show them and give them more certainty, they're going to give you more budget to make that thing happen. And one other like tactical tip that I really recommend for everyone in-house listening, it's like super clutch, I used to do it, is like put together a monthly newsletter where you share what's working in paid media, like what worked and what didn't work. And especially when it comes to like ads, everybody loves to give their opinion on ads. Like, oh, that one, I think that one is good, that one's bad. And you can have fun with it. But basically every month you're sharing with the people that matter. And ideally it's, like company wide if possible. So like you're building more and more certainty with these people, because you can show them, hey, we tested these 5 things last month. This was our priority. Here's how it performed, etc. Here's what worked. Here's what didn't work. So fast forward at the end of the quarter, the worst place you can be in is performance doesn't work. You're at the end of the quarter and people are caught by surprise. that is the worst place. That's like scary. You know what I mean? So ideally, if the quarter doesn't go well, by the end of the quarter, no one's surprised. And they're just like, okay, what are we going to do to fix this, right? How do we go from here? Let's touch on a topic here around the battle of scaling versus profitability, because I think this is an important one. Because there's a dichotomy, right? Like I want to drive more, aka more leads, more trials, more demos, whatever, more ops, but I also want it for a lower cost. And people don't realize, like, as you scale, what you're doing is you're opening up your targeting fundamentally, right?
Yeah.
So there's two ways you can scale, like fundamentally speaking. There's vertical scaling and there's horizontal scaling. So vertical scaling is all about like increasing budget. It's basically, this campaign is working. How do I maximize the utility of this campaign? So that means I can increase my budget to drive more volume, right? It means I can tweak my audience for that existing campaign so that I can increase my audience size. It means I can increase my bids so that I'm able to drive more impressions, right, et cetera, and buy more inventory, be more competitive in the marketplace. This is all around vertical scaling and maximizing an individual thing. Horizontal scaling is where now I'm launching more campaigns, right? And this could be in the form of like within an existing channel, across a different channel. And we kind of touched on this earlier, but I always laugh when people tell me, they're like, I've done everything I can do on Google. I have scaled Google ads. And I'm just like, have you really? Like, not to nerd out too much here, but like there's 42 ways you can scale Google ads. You know, when you think about like the horizontal scaling, so you have like non-brand, brand, competitive, RLSA, DSA, right? Those are all just different themes of campaigns on search. And then like, that's not to include also vertical scaling, where now you can go exact match, phrase match, broad discovery, broad match. And I'm like, you did all that? And they're like, oh, wait a second, I just did like high intent exact match. You know what I mean? And I'm like, okay, like there's a lot of opportunity to be had, you know? So closing on this point around like profitability and scaling, just be very mindful, like as you scale, what you're essentially doing is you're letting in inefficiencies, right? You're basically saying, give me more, show my ads to more people fundamentally, right? Whether it's to the increment of budget or like adjusting of targeting, but you're saying, show me to more people. And that means like now you need to go through the process of optimization to weed out which are the people that are not a good fit versus those that are. So generally speaking, as you scale, you start to see like volume goes up, which is fantastic, but the associated cost also goes up. So one just quick thing to close on here is set some optimization rules for yourself. Set some guardrails on what is acceptable versus what is not. And one easy thing that we always recommend to clients is figure out what is your break-even cost per lead. So for context, like I remember when I was at, I think it was when I was at Metadata, we were like unhappy with the cost per demo for some of our campaigns. I think like our conversation ad campaign was driving a dramatically lower cost per demo. I think it was like, I don't remember, it was like 400, 500, but it was like lower. And then our image ad campaign was driving demos for like 1,000. And we were like, oh, the image ad campaigns suck because the conversation one is doing, you know, like it's driving more volume at half the cost. And then what we did is we paused the image ad one and we focused on the conversation ad one. But overall, we lost because the image ad one was actually driving volume, you know, but we turned it off because we are comparing it against our best performing campaign, right? And ad. And that's a losing game. Really what you're trying to do as you scale is you're trying to launch more and more things where the cumulative performance is greater than the individual part, right? So for context, like in that instance, it's like the e-commerce of like, oh, I've got a 700% ROAS. It's like, fantastic. How many sales did you make? You know, oh, I got 3 sales at 700%. It's like, great, but like, you're never going to get anywhere.
Yeah.
You know, versus like the pros in e-commerce, they're like, I'll take a 200% ROAS or even a break-even ROAS on the front end, but I'm driving 1,000 sales a month.
Yeah, and they have recurrence.
You know what I mean? And then they know they're going to make up the value over the lifetime of that customer, right? And pay it back. So for you, if you're listening to this, like figure out your break-even. So in that hypothetical example I was sharing, in our case, I think the break-even was like 3,000 at the time. So we were like complaining about 1,000 when the reality is we could spend 2 times more, right? To get to our break-even. Doesn't mean you have to hit break-even. This depends on how aggressive you want to be. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, it is an auction, right? There is an element of competitiveness. So you need to make sure you're being competitive enough to drive the volume you want. There's like an old saying from Dan Kennedy. It's like he who can afford to spend the most to acquire a customer wins. And it's true. So if you're willing to spend up to 1,000, but I'm willing to spend up to 3,000, I'm going to beat you, you know? So this is like where knowing your numbers is super important. And then you can set these guardrails, these optimization rules so that you scale responsibly.
Yeah, that's a good tip. And that's where most brands fail too, because they don't know the numbers and they might get scared with a 4,000 CPL. And maybe they can afford 10,000 CPL depending on your
Especially if you're
average deal
enterprise,
size, right?
And yeah, exactly. Like, especially these enterprise companies. There was one company we worked with, they were selling AI drones to the government. It was like one contract. By the way, that's like story for another day. It's like, how do you sell AI drones to the government? That was a fun project. But like one contract was like millions of dollars,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
It's a completely different shift.
And yeah, knowing your numbers is key. And again, that's ties back to the initial point around the shiny object, because maybe, oh, I'm paying 6K and I'm seeing these folks around here on LinkedIn saying they're paying $400 for a meeting. Oh, my campaigns suck. No, they don't. Maybe 400 is expensive for them. Maybe they don't even know it, right? And yeah, I think you hit it perfectly with that example. Knowing your numbers for sure.
Cool. Well, we're at the end of this episode today. Thank you so much for being here, guys, and we'll see you in the next one. Thanks so much for watching this episode. If today's combo hit home for you and you want to go deeper, check out AdConversion.com. You'll find free courses, a killer advertising community, and if you're ready to scale, we'd love to work with you.